Okay, so welcome everyone to this GLP Working Group for Telecoupling Research webinar. This is our first webinar in quite a while. I guess it's fair to say that we've been dormant for a little bit in 2022. So this is our relaunch webinar. It's a webinar that we kind of want to get the community together again and start thinking about how we should work together in the coming years. And I'll do a short introductory presentation here in the beginning, and then we'll have a chance to go into breakout rooms and discuss the topics that we send around in the webinar invitation as well. And as you had heard in the beginning, the webinar is recorded and will be made available to all the people who registered for this webinar event. But for the first thing I want to do is to welcome two new coordinators to our coordinator team. So myself, Cecilie Friis at the University of Copenhagen, and Juliet Seringer, who is now at the WIS Academy and the University of Bern, have been organizing the working group for the past 3 years. But for this relaunching of the working group, we've called in great support for from a couple of our colleagues. So we have been joined by Johanna Konen from Leuphana University. Johanna is just finishing her PhD, and she's been working in this ETN-ITN coupled, who's been working a lot on telecoupling, and she's focusing on governance. And then we have Maria Jose Ibarola from Mexico, from the, I can't pronounce your university name in Spanish. And she's been working also on telecoupling issues, especially in fresh vegetable systems and other kinds of food systems. So she's joining us from Mexico. And we wanted to expand the coordinating team also to make it a little bit more sustainable in terms of the tasks that are for setting up these different activities. And make sure that we have strength in us enough to carry the different activities that we want to do. You are probably all members of the working group since you are here. You've maybe received the invitation in our newsletter. But if there are new people here who are not a member yet of the working group, it's very easy to become a member. You go to the working group website through the glp.earth portal and you sign up, and we regularly admit new members. So that's how you become a member. The aim, so I just wanted to recap the aim of the working group that we've been, that we've had for the first round of the group's work. So we want to basically to be a platform for exchange and discussion and consolidation of knowledge around telecoupling related topics in order to advance how we understand these complex dynamics, how they play out in different types of land systems and in different contexts, as well as both the challenges and opportunities that telecoupled systems present to the land use and the land users that we work with. Then we want to identify potentially best practices and methods for studying telecoupled systems, but also for addressing some of the problems that they bring with them. And to bring together researchers from across different geographical contexts, but also from across different stages of the career path. So we really aim to be a platform to include early career researchers as well as more senior researchers, and to exchange knowledge across these stages. And then we are doing different activities to communicate our work, so far mainly to an academic audience, but we've also had a couple of activities that have included non-academic actors needed for maybe addressing some of these issues. Okay, so for the first round of the working group, so how this works in the GLP context is that a working group is proposed to the scientific steering committee and is, if accepted, granted a 3-year working period. And we've had that period as the Telecoupling Working Group 1.0. Last year, we then submitted an application for the Telecoupling Working Group 2.0, which is what we are relaunching today. Basically, this webinar is to think about and reflect on what we've been doing for the past 3 years and which of these activities, or maybe new activities, we want to bring in to the next round of the working group's work. So just recapping a few of the things that we've been doing. So at the last Open Science meeting, GLP Open Science meeting, we organized several sessions, both one more focusing on methods and one discussing with non-academic partners how to address some of the challenges that arise in telecoupled systems. Then we organized, especially in the beginning of the working groups, live a series of webinars where people could come and present their latest results. We've also had a webinar that presented a new data set that then led to a discussion of how this data set could be used by other people, and other kinds of sessions in a webinar. These webinars we've then used to write blog posts that have been posted on the GLP website and our working group website, synthesizing key messages from these discussions. And we've been using the blog posts as a kind of low-hanging fruit output from the webinar, so that all the work that has been put into organizing the webinars, also from the speaker's side, can be captured in a more tangible output, also in a written format that can maybe reach a wider audience. So that's been the main point of the blog posts. And then we have these newsletters that we have been sending out regularly up until last year, and are now hopefully gonna send out again and to share our collective research outputs and ideas and data set and whatever else people want to share through the newsletter. So we are hoping to send out a newsletter 3 times per year in the coming years to follow the academic schedule. Okay, so that's what we have been doing. So what we're doing today, and what we really hope that you will join us in doing, is to discuss where we are going with this working group and in the field of telecoupling research more generally. So we have these 2 questions that we would like to discuss with you. The first one is, what are the current research gaps and research frontiers in telecoupling research? And then the second one is, practically, what are the activities that you would like to engage in and that could make this group a lively community of exchange for the coming 2-3 years that we have, that is for this period the working group is set up for. And because it's just easier to get creativity and discussion flowing when you're a smaller group, we have thought that we wanted to break up in breakout groups and have half an hour to discuss with each other in a smaller group and capture ideas and perspectives, and then join together again after half an hour and share these and hopefully make a plan for the next steps of what we want to do as a working group.
So very briefly, we're going to, each of us, 4 coordinators, will talk in 2 or 3 minutes what were the main results of our discussion. So for our group 1, we had very interesting examples. We all said that, or we were Daniela, Madeleine, and Eleanor. We all started saying, or the 3 of you started saying, that you didn't have anything to do with telecoupling research, and then it pops out that many examples from your research connected with this telecoupling ideas, and we identified mainly 2 challenges, or we said maybe it was like a theme, not maybe a research gap, but how to link or find matches across scales. We had some examples, like from Robert, like how to connect small farmers with national governments and the global community of markets. And yeah, in Argentina, it was how to connect the different levels of scales in governance from the province government, different provinces, very different approaches, and the national government and the small farmers organizations. So also that we identify it was a challenge of linking scales. And also, well, a bit different one was an example of Kenya, of water scarcity, and the challenge was how to define the research limits or the boundaries of that analysis, for instance, and who to include, because in that example, for instance, it was mainly including the people very directly focused in the research in the dry scarcity area, but they did not include other actors or regions a bit far away, but which were affected from that problem. And so well, I identified it as the systems that are not directly related with the problematic, and usually that's difficult to address or identify. And I guess that's it. And we have specific notes. And for the activities, since we, the four of us, the three of in the group are new members, or maybe they haven't even registered, they were asking on how was the communication between the member groups. Actually, I was not aware how to, if there was a platform to connect, and I think it was only like through the newsletter or directly in the website, and then you can just identify someone directly by email. And the idea is that that's also a bit informal and difficult to address, and if there was like a more informal platform for communication, and one example was Slack, which Eleanor shared, when I don't know what it is, but like to have a nice informal platform to just talk and have a coffee and maybe meet. And that was one idea. And the other idea, well, was one more of a question if there has been before like a platform also to find collaboration for projects. If how could that happen, or but that's the main thing, like communication between members, and that's it.
Great, thanks, Maria. Would you change the slide?
Yeah.
So I should maybe also just say that we are this is our closing session. It will probably run a bit over 3 o'clock, so you, of course, if you have other engagements at 3, you're welcome to log off, and we just want to say thanks for you for joining today. But we are going to just take a few more minutes after 3 to wrap up the session. So in the breakout group that I was leading, we were Josh and Janina and Grace, who you're in my top corner. That's why I couldn't see you. And we had a good discussion also on, based on our own research, what could be, or what are the frontiers that we see. And there were topics around the effects of these big global shocks that we've been experiencing in the past few years. So Grace is working especially on the timber sector and forestry sector. So how are the war in Ukraine, for instance, affecting these systems, telecoupled systems over distance? We also had some themes around integration of more environmental justice concerns, or taking into account indigenous groups and their rights in these systems that maybe have been underexplored or could be explored more. And Josh brought up the missed opportunity of an overly focus on sectors, perhaps, rather than specific corporations, in understanding, so the role of specific actors or specific corporations linking global specific flows instead of looking at sectors. And then we had a short discussion on whether there is a need for taking stock on a more conceptual level on telecouplings, teleconnections, global linkages, global value chains as boundary concepts for discussing how these global systems work. So that could maybe be a topic we also take up. Then for the activities, we also had a discussion on how to use the working group to seek collaborators for specific projects and concepts. So maybe that's something we should open a fora for in the newsletter, or otherwise somehow find a way of facilitating this. Also on exchanging on specific methods, and maybe identify if there are smaller subgroups in specific that are interested in more specific parts of this community that could establish more regular interactions or more intensive interactions that could lead to perspective papers, for instance, either out of webinars or other types of formats. Maybe a bit like the one, so we have with Jeff, who's also here, who's in one of the remittances working group, and with the social ecological systems in Latin America working group, we've done a series of webinars that have led to a perspective paper. So some formats like this could perhaps also, we could organize more of that in the future. I guess that was it from group number 2.
Hi, so for group number 3, we've been discussing among Leandra, Nink, and Nicholas. And so for the first question, we started with Nicholas' frontier regarding telecoupled systems around illicit economic activities and flows, which of course then pose specific methodological challenges as well. And there are already some insights on these potential options for triangulating methods and so on. And then also, while we are maybe relatively far advanced on the conceptual side of understanding telecoupling, there is still a lot left to be done with regards to quantification of flows, feedbacks especially, but also spillover systems. As I've just shared that last week I was experiencing such effects on a spillover system, like of that illicit cocaine trade by visiting a country here in West Africa, Guinea-Bissau, where some of these impacts are really visible. So spillover systems should not be overlooked. And then for myself, of course, trying to engage in these systems for transformation, the whole issue of changing actor constellations, of keeping pace with these really highly dynamic systems over time, and then also the question of how and where do you engage in such a complex global local system if you want to change it for the better. And with regards to the working group, there has been the suggestion to also offer some more informal spaces to engage, to actually be able to get to know each other, something which we haven't, I think, done a lot so far. Whereas for the webinars, we were not 100% sure how to continue with those. I mean, they are valuable, of course, whenever there is a topic that's interesting and people have time, they join, but then also there's a lot going on in the virtual space. So I think we still have to figure out how to continue with those. But then workshops around specific themes are always welcome. And of course, I think, as you also mentioned before, leveraging the potential of this working group with regards to its huge diversity of members and institutions and countries represented in some of these global funding calls, such as from the Belmont Forum, for example. Thanks.
Okay, then I will move to the last group where Altaf, Martin, and I have been in. So I think the themes are, first of all, understanding the biodiversity impacts of globally telecoupled systems. I mean, biodiversity is one of the big topics being discussed at the moment, but also really evaluating the impacts of novel policy interventions. I mean, there are a lot of new things going on, the EU deforestation regulation, but I think also the new due diligence regulations. They will have effects, but then it needs to be assessed, but also the private ones, the zero deforestation commitments, some of them. And then also, Martin mentioned that assessing the feasibility and acceptability of these policies is also one important dimension. I mean, we can assess theoretically how they have an impact and how this works, but is it really feasible and socially and politically acceptable to implement these and other policies? Then another topic is that we have in the telecoupling community seen a lot of calls for flow-based governance in many papers, and also these interactions with place-based governance. But I think we lack a bit of conceptual clarity of what flow-based governance really is and how it works and what are the mechanisms behind it and how it interacts with place-based governance. So this entire concept, I think, is something to that could be explored a bit further in the future. What is frequently mentioned in the literature are policy mixes to govern telecoupled systems, how to combine different governance spheres. And I mean, the first group also talked about linking scales across governance, different governance actors and so on. So maybe it goes in a similar direction. And then lastly, how to govern, or how to not only govern, but also assess the impacts of more invisible or non-consumer facing flows. I mean, we had Julie mentioned illicit flows as one of the flows that are often overlooked in the research. But then what's about flows like sand, fertilizers, pesticides, and so on, which are not so much talked about. We talk a lot about agricultural commodity flows, but we sometimes have other flows that have detrimental effects, which are overlooked. So this is one. And then we basically, in terms of future activities in the working group. So we said like workshops could be, and it has been mentioned by the other groups as well, could be interesting to do. Webinars also organized around certain themes like speed talks and having joint discussions, potentially with the aim of writing joint output like perspective article, any newsletter or so on, or blog post. And then also to share data sets. And maybe this is something we could do through the newsletter, because there's sometimes so much data and people are looking for data as a basis for collaboration. So this is also something we thought could be explored. Yes, and I think we're approaching kind of the end of our webinar. So I will just wrap up here. Thanks for your participation. I think just from seeing these Jamboard slides, it has been a very interesting, inspiring discussion. We will actually sit together and synthesize today's results and share a summary with you, probably in the newsletter, potentially a blog post. So we will basically, collect everything, share it with you. And we invite everybody to sign up to our working group. And then share the recording with you. But Cecilie, you still want to add?
Just a few messages from Lauren on the technical side. So for signing up, for those of you who were not there when she presented that. So once in a while, there's someone who will have a sort of bug in their system. So the link that should automatically signs up opens up as an email. And if that doesn't work for signing up for the working group, just send Lauren an email. And you can find her email on the GLP website. So if that's not working. And then we also apparently, as working groups, will receive a lot of information about the OSM 2024 next week, and will be encouraged to participate a lot in that. So that's probably also a format where we should discuss how we want to contribute, and where some of these discussions could potentially be taken up in a deeper way through panels or sessions. And as for any kind of ideas that anyone have, we always encourage you to just send us an email as coordinators. So Grace, for instance, has an idea around a more specific discussion on timber flows and timber trade. So that could be one topic that is taken up as a workshop or a webinar in the future. And if anyone else would like to organize a similar format as this one or a longer workshop through the working group, just approach us and we help you set it up in our platforms. Yeah. Hi, Jack. We are just wrapping up.
Everyone. Yeah. Good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are. Sorry, I'm late, but I had another meeting.
That's okay.
Yeah. So great.
We will send out summaries and recordings through to the participants.
Yeah, thank you all so much for the great work that you have been doing. That's great. Also, I've been really enjoying reading some of your publications as well. So I don't know whether this is a good time to mention a couple of things. I have been approached to edit special issue on telecoupling and also do a book on telecoupling. I don't know whether any of you will be interested or not, but if you are, maybe you can contact me and we can discuss more later.
Thanks. And if people are interested in that, should they just shoot you a mail? Jack?
I'm sorry?
So if people are interested in any of the two formats you just mentioned, should they just write you an email?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I can put my email address here. So the special issue is for global sustainability. I was asked to do this for a long time ago. I don't know whether they're still interested or not. I have been busy with other things. And then also a book. So we can talk more later.
Great, thank you. So if there are no other final reflections or thoughts, thank you all for coming then and engaging in the discussions. Good to see you.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.